This is a criminal case. Mr. Jones is charged with 1 count of first-degree murder with a firearm and 1 count of burglary of a dwelling with an assault or battery while armed. The definition or the elements of these crimes will be explained to you later. It's your solemn responsibility to determine if the state has proved its accusations beyond a reasonable doubt against the defendant.
Good morning. How many times did you hear during jury selection that we couldn't talk about the evidence in this case? That's over. That's over right now. I want to talk to you about the evidence in this case. November 17th of 2011 was a Thursday, and it was the last day of Brian Simpson's life. He woke up that morning at his house on Fiddlewood in the Central Beach area here in Vero Beach. He went to work. He came home from work in the evening. He went to his house. He entered his house, and then he left, and then returned quickly after he left. When he came home that last time, it was for the last time. He never left that house. He walked in through his front door. He would have seen that his dog was penned up in the wrong part of the house. It was penned up like in a sunroom where it never was because it was allowed to roam free. He would have noticed his kitchen window open, and he would have known that something was amiss. He went to his bedroom, and he found intruders in his house. And he could tell that they had been going through his bedroom because drawers were open, things were in the process of being ransacked. The intruders fled and hid in the bathroom of his master bedroom. Brian Simpson went towards the front of his house, and he grabbed a flagpole with the American flag still attached, and he took it into that bedroom to try to defend himself and his home from the intruders who were now in the bathroom. He struggled over the door of the bathroom with the intruder. He ended up wedging the pole of the flag with the flag this way on him, put the pole between the door and the door frame of the bathroom, and he's trying to swing at one of the intruders who had entered his house. The intruder responded to Brian's defense, and he pulled out a small white-handled revolver, small caliber, and he fired multiple times with Brian on the other side of the bathroom door. 2 of the shots hit Brian on the right side, in his arm and up here, upper chest. Brian staggered back from the bathroom door. He ended up kind of in the center of his own bedroom, where he collapsed from the wounds. One of the bullets, the one that entered up here, pierced an artery. He slipped into unconsciousness and died on his bedroom floor from a massive hemorrhage caused by that artery being perforated. Now, you will see the evidence in this case, and we'll show you the overwhelming evidence, just as the defendant used overwhelming force against Brian as he defended his home. The state will bring to bear overwhelming evidence to show that this defendant over here is the intruder, the burglar, the murderer of Brian Simpson. Let's go back in time a little bit. Just before the murder, between 5:45 and 6 p.m., you're going to hear that Michelle Fields was underneath the Barber Bridge, on the east side of the bridge, on the beach side. She went there to go fishing with her uncle. She arrived, and she noticed a Japanese-style sports motorcycle parked up underneath the bridge, parallel to the concrete supports of the bridge. She's a person who's into motorcycles all her life. She really noticed it. It stuck out in her head because it was odd in her head for a motorcycle to be parked up underneath the bridge like that, because it was a way to walk to the Riverside Cafe, and it didn't make sense to her that somebody's fishing with a motorcycle, because it'd be hard to carry a fishing pole on a motorcycle. So it stuck out in her head. At 6:05, between 6 and 6:05 p.m., Kathy McCarthy is just to the northeast of the base of the east side of the Barber Bridge. She's there near McWilliams Park. She's going to tell you that she saw two black males passed by her as she was at that location at that exact time. And she knows the time because of phone contact she had going on. So she could precisely identify the time. She noticed that one of the black males had really short hair, and the other had dreads. And she noticed them as they walked by her. They were in close proximity to her. That's at 6:05. At 6:15 p.m., just some blocks north and then to the east, you're going to hear that Hunter Bowles was going to a meeting. He's in a car. And he noticed two black males walking down the street, and this is a residential area. He noticed one had dreads in his hair. They were both wearing dark clothing, and one had really short hair. And he noticed this, and he knows what time it was because he had texted his mom. So he knew that it was just before 6:15 that he saw these two individuals. He noticed that the individuals were going down Date Palm, which is, you're going to hear, is just northeast of the bridge, and that they turned left or going north on Mockingbird. Mockingbird is a street that intersects with Fiddlewood, and Fiddlewood is the road that Brian Simpson lived on. So he saw them go up north on Mockingbird. He went on his way. On Fiddlewood, several houses down from where Brian Simpson lived, you're going to hear that Michael Brownstein lived there. And on that day, November 17th, he had two bicycles on the front porch of his residence, just sitting out there. Those two bikes were stolen on the 17th. You're going to hear from Bill Shabbat, who lives right next door to the Simpsons. He's going to tell you that about 6:30 p.m., he was coming back from his girlfriend's, went to his house right next door to the Simpsons, and he noticed what he believed to be a black female riding a bike, kind of meandering aimlessly, just kind of circling in the middle of the road in close proximity to the Simpsons residence. He thought it was odd because he had never seen this person before, and it is a very residential area. You're going to see that on the map in a little bit. So he made note of it. He thought it was a black female because of long hair that was pulled back behind the head. Now, at 6:39 p.m., Kristen Simpson, the wife of Brian, had the last time she ever communicated with her husband via a text message regarding their daughter's choral performance that night. So at 6:39, Brian Simpson was texting with his wife. Just before 6:43 p.m., Patricia Katschik, who lives right behind the Simpsons residence, their backyards come together, she's out on her back porch with her husband. They're going to have dinner out on their back porch. And as she's out there, her and her husband hear loud banging or what could possibly be shots coming from the Simpsons house, which is directly behind them. So what does she do? Well, she calls 911 because of what she heard. She was concerned. That 911 call happened at 6:43. And she heard this sound shortly before then. That's what triggered the police involvement on this case. They responded to the beach area. They came to Fiddlewood. They found Brian Simpson crumpled on his bedroom floor, just as I described previously. They immediately started an investigation. He was dead at that point from the internal hemorrhage that I just discussed with you. Obviously, they have a homicide. They have a homicide scene. And you're going to hear how carefully and how much time they spent at that scene. And during their investigation of that scene, they recovered patterned impressions from the scene, such as treadwear patterns of footwear. And you're going to hear about other pattern impressions that they lifted from that crime scene. Brian Simpson was transported to the medical examiner's office because it's a homicide. And in a homicide case, all bodies go to the medical examiner to be examined with an autopsy. Dr. Linda O'Neill did the autopsy on Brian. And during the autopsy, she found the 2 bullet wounds that I just described. And not only that, she just found entrance wounds. The bullets were still inside the body. So she removed the bullets, and they were placed into evidence, and they were later sent to the Indian River Crime Lab. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. So that's what happened initially, right after the 17th. This was a Thursday, as I said. I want to jump forward now to Monday, November 21st. November 21st. There's an officer with the Vero Beach Police Department who's on normal patrol out on the beach side just east of the Barber Bridge. And as he's out there, this is before noon, late morning, before noon, he sees 2 black males on a Japanese sports bike. And you just saw them, there's nothing else in this. But within about 15 minutes, he's dispatched north of that location where he saw this motorcycle with the black males in regards to a report of suspicious black males in a residential area. So he goes out there. And when he goes out there, he meets up and eventually 2 males are found. Dawn Brigoff lives on Indian Lilac, which is just a couple of blocks north of Fiddlewood. And she was going out for a jog about that same time. And as she was going for a jog, she encountered a black male with a thick hooded, like a sweatshirt. She thought it was kind of odd because of the temperature that day. And then she noticed there was another black male down the block in another direction, all in black. And they're just kind of there looking around at houses, walking along. She thought it was odd. She continued on her jog. When she came back from her jog, she then saw these 2 individuals together now. They were apart before, now they're together. And they were right on the edge of this foreclosed property that nobody lived at. Nobody had any business being there. She was kind of concerned. She saw an officer. She flagged an officer down. As I said, another officer was already went there because of other reports. So, these 2 males, the police come up on them. And that's how this case starts. Because that's when this defendant, as well as the co-defendant, Darius Robinson, come into this case. Now, the defendant out there at Beachside, when the cops first came up to him, he said he was just there sightseeing. He's sightseeing in a residential area. That's fine. He goes down to the police department just as Darius Robinson is taken down to the police department. Before that happens, though, the defendant sends off a text to Darius Robinson, the co-defendant. And that text says, "Tell him we were dropped off," meaning they didn't get there via motorcycle. And when they were caught, they weren't in the vicinity of this motorcycle. Now, the cops knew they were on a motorcycle because that officer on patrol saw that and could link them to this motorcycle. This motorcycle was parked over by the boardwalk, not where they were apprehended at. But for some reason, the defendant sent that text to his co-defendant. He goes down to the police station. He's read his Miranda warnings, the defendant is, and he decides to give a statement. The police ask him some questions. He says that his age is 23. The police say, "Well, where were you last Thursday?" And this is Monday to Thursday, 4 days. "Where were you last Thursday?" "I think I was in Fort Lauderdale with my cousin." "Well, what's your cousin's name?" He provides the name. "What's your cousin's number so we can call and verify?" "Well, I don't have my cousin's number." That's fine. You're going to hear the defendant's statement to law enforcement. There's a video of it. You're going to see it during this trial. I want you to watch how the defendant answers questions. And how a simple question like, "Where were you Thursday?" is, "I think I was there. I think I was in Fort Lauderdale." not sure, evasive. Not about a Thursday 6 months earlier, a Thursday 4 days earlier. Watch his demeanor. You can see what's going on. He's trying to figure out what the cops have or don't have. He's not sure he should commit to or not commit to. You judge that for yourself. You are the trier of fact in this case. Another thing he said, though, is that he knows Darius Robinson. He calls him a friend. And he says, I wasn't with Darius Robinson the week before, meaning that Thursday, the week of the homicide. I wasn't with Darius Robinson. That's what he says. And they're asking, when was the last time you were with him besides today? You're not on the beach with him. He's not really sure on that, but he says he wasn't with Darius the week before. During the interview, they took his shoes, they took his phone, and then he was arrested. Now, Darius Robinson was let go that day because he was only 16 years old, and they had to release him to the custody of his mother on that one day. And so Darius Robinson, who was also interviewed and lied through his teeth, was released to his mom. And he leaves. The defendant's still at the police station. Later on that night of the 21st, Milo Thornton and Darius Robinson's mother convinced Darius Robinson to go back to the Vero Beach Police Department on his own to give another statement. And he gets kind of emotional when Milo Thornton is asking him to go back to the police department. And he goes back to the police department. This is in the middle of the night on that Monday. And he starts to tell what you're going to see based on the evidence is the truth. He didn't give up the whole truth right then, but he starts to. And eventually, he tells the truth. And you'll know it's the truth based on the evidence you hear in this case. And he did this voluntarily, going back down to the Vero Beach Police Department on his own. Now, during this trial, this week, you're going to hear from Darius Robinson. Darius Robinson is the co-defendant. He is the principal to the defendant's murder. And he is charged just as the defendant is because he is his principal. You're going to hear that he doesn't have any kind of deal with the state, doesn't have any get-out-of-jail-free card with the state. He's going to testify. He hasn't entered a plea to anything. He's looking at a lot of prison. But this case is not just about Darius Robinson. You're going to see that Darius Robinson is a tool the cops use to get to other evidence, other corroborating evidence that shows the defendant committed this crime. This case is not about Darius Robinson. You don't have to take Darius Robinson's word for the defendant's involvement and his ultimate murder of Brian Simpson, because the other evidence that led from Darius Robinson's statements show that the defendant independently committed this crime. Corroborated evidence. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about Darius Robinson. He'll tell you that on November 17th of 2011, he was at his apartments in the Highlands area of Vero Beach, where he lived with his mother and his siblings, and the defendant showed up on his motorcycle. And he knew the defendant because the defendant is related to another person that Darius Robinson knows. And he'll tell you, Darius Robinson's going to tell you, that the defendant was discussing doing a burglary out on the beach, and the defendant had a specific house in mind. Now that's not the Simpson residence, because they were never able to find the house that the defendant was suggesting when he met with Darius Robinson. And during this meeting with Darius Robinson, the defendant pulls out a small, white-handled revolver and shows it to Darius Robinson. And then the two of them get on the defendant's motorcycle, and they go to the BP gas station there near the Highlands, and they fill up the motorcycle with gas. Darius Robinson's going to tell you they were dressed all in black, He's going to tell you that his hair, he had dreads. He doesn't have them now, but at that point in time, he had his hair in dreadlocks, and they were pulled back behind his head. After they got gas there at the BP, which was around 4:38 p.m. or so, they go directly to the beach. And they park the motorcycle underneath by the concrete supports on the east side of the bridge. And then on foot, they make their way through a residential area. They go by McWilliams Park, and they make their way into this residential area. And then when they reach the street where ultimately the burglary happened, they stole 2 bikes. Then they saw Brian Simpson leave his house. Remember I said he came home, and then he left, and then he came back. They saw him leave, so they thought they had an easy target, an empty house. They just saw the owner leave. So that's the house they decided to hit. Darius Robinson was supposed to be the lookout. He was supposed to stay out on the outside of the house. And the defendant put his bike down on the east side of the front area of Brian Simpson's property, made his way through a gate on the left side of the home, the east side of the home, and made his way around back. That's what Darius Robinson saw. Darius Robinson was supposed to be staying outside. At this point in time, Darius Robinson is on a bike by himself, aimlessly circling around, waiting for the defendant to come out. But Darius Robinson decides to go in to the house as well. He puts his bike down. He enters the same on the left side of the house, goes around back, finds an open window. It's an open kitchen window, climbs in, finds the defendant in the bedroom, and the defendant is in the process of stealing jewelry. And Darius Robinson fully cooperates, participates, helps. He has a bag that they find there, and they're loading items in from dressers and so forth. As this is going on, homeowner Brian Simpson comes home, and they're in the bedroom. They hear him come home. They run into the master bathroom to try to get out. Darius Robinson stands up on a toilet there, and he's trying to open up a small window above the toilet to see if he can get out. The defendant is by the door of the bathroom. And he said that Brian Simpson is pulling on the door, and he sees a stick come through. This is what Darius Robinson's going to tell you. And the stick is being swung towards where Jones is, the defendant, because Darius Robinson's up on the toilet trying to get the window open. And he hears shots, and he looks. And he sees the defendant with the same white-handled small revolver in his hand. He's still trying to get the window open. He hears more shooting. Again, the defendant with a small caliber white-handled pistol in his hand. Darius makes it through the window, ends up bushes, grass, backyard, with the bag of jewelry. Some of it had spilled out. The defendant did not go out through the window, though. He came out through the rear of the house, probably because he was too large to get through the window. And you'll see a picture of how wide that window was open. Remember, Darius Robinson is 16, and you're going to see what he looked like back then in the pictures. Well, the two of them then hop on the bikes that they stole, and they make their way very quickly back towards the Barber Bridge. Before they get to the bridge, they dump the bikes. Then they make their way a very short distance on foot, hop on the motorcycle, and they take off at a very high rate of speed off of the beach back onto the main line. And they go to the house where Amanda and Laura Bloom live. And this is a house, Darius Robinson will tell you, that the defendant stayed at. He was living there at this point in time. He had a room there. They get there, they get off the motorcycle, and then the defendant goes into the house with the bag of jewelry. And then he comes back out with it, and they look at the items that they just looted from Brian Simpson's bedroom. Then Darius Robinson goes home empty-handed. The defendant goes back in with these stolen items. Darius Robinson was entrusted to carry the loot bag from the murder scene on the bicycles through the residential neighborhoods back to the motorcycle. But at this point in time, he's not trusted to keep the bag. The defendant keeps the bag of stolen goods. And you're going to hear from Darius Robinson. You're going to see he's not exactly the sharpest guy in the world. He's 16 in ninth grade. That's what you're going to hear. So he goes off back to his place with his mom and his siblings. Next day is Friday, right? Because this is Thursday. This is Thursday night. Now we're into Friday. Darius Robinson doesn't go to school the next day. Now, the defendant shows up on his motorcycle. And guess what? The two of them go to Fort Lauderdale. They decide to go out of town for a couple of days. The defendant takes jewelry. They go to a flea market or a swap shop down in South Florida, Broward County, and they sell jewelry, get rid of jewelry. And at that point in time, Darius Robinson is rewarded for his participation in this burglary. He's given some money and a phone by the defendant for his participation. So they do this right when they get down to Lauderdale. Do they come back to Vero Beach? No. Decide to stay out of town for a couple of days. On Sunday, the two of them return to Vero Beach on the defendant's motorcycle. The next day is what? Monday. Monday morning, does Darius Robinson go to school? No. The defendant shows back up at Darius Robinson's place on his motorcycle, and they decide to go sightseeing on the beach. Darius Robinson is going to tell you, they weren't going sightseeing. They were going to look for the small caliber revolver with white grips. That's why they were going back to the beach, to retrieve it. So they get out to the beach, they separate, he's dropped off, defendant goes and parks the motorcycle, and initially they were separated, looking through yards, looking through property for this small white-handled pistol. And this is just a couple of blocks north of where the Simpsons residence was. That's when the cops show up. That's when the cops show up, and then take them and back to the police department. What I just told you. Now, as I was saying before, you don't have to rely on Darius Robinson's word alone, because there's corroborating evidence. For example, remember when I said that Darius Robinson will tell you that they went to the BP gas station, loaded up with gas, 5:38 p.m. Within a half an hour of Michelle Fields seeing the motorcycle under the bridge, within an hour of Brian Simpson's murder, guess what the BP video shows? The defendant, who he was not with out of his own mouth the previous week, and Darius Robinson, as clear as day on this BP video, together, all in black. Darius Robinson with his hair and dreads pulled back like this, just as Bill Shavit described. You can even see the type of footwear each was wearing. You'll see that the defendant was wearing a pair of Nike, and that Darius Robinson was wearing slides. That's how good the video is. So you don't exactly have to take Darius Robinson's word for this. Like they were together right before the homicide, and they were at this gas station. Because it's on video, you're going to see it. And incidentally, Milo Thornton was also in that BP, just completely coincidental, and saw them there as well. Corroboration. Now, you might recall that I said they took the defendant's shoes during the interview process. You're going to see that. Well, the defendant told the interviewers that he didn't think, although he wasn't sure, but he didn't think he was wearing those shoes the week before, these Nike shoes that he had on his feet on the day of the interview on the 21st. He thought he was wearing some dress shoes the week before. That's what he's telling the cops. Now, you're going to see in the video what kind of shoes he had. And you're going to see the shoes that he took off his feet. And you're going to hear from Mark Chapman, who works over at the crime laboratory. He's going to tell you that he examined those shoes, and he examined those shoes in relation to pattern footwear impressions that were taken from Brian Simpson's house. And he's going to tell you that the treads are consistent. The shoes on the defendant's feet that he wasn't wearing the week before, and what happened at the Simpsons residence, the ones taken from there. Now, of course, these aren't the only Nike shoes in the world. We recognize that. But another factor that corroborates who? Darius Robinson. You're also going to hear that the police did a search warrant at the Blooms where the defendant was staying. During that search warrant, they found a pair of black gloves. The black gloves were also taken down to the crime laboratory. They were examined. They were compared to pattern impressions that came out of the Simpsons residence. When the crime scene spent all that time there processing, and you hear all about that. And guess what? Consistent. Obviously, this is not the only pair of black gloves in the world. But what I didn't tell you before is that Darius Robinson's going to tell you that the defendant had a pair of black gloves on during the burglary. Now, Darius Robinson was not wearing gloves, but the defendant had a pair of gloves. And lo and behold, a pair of black gloves found during the search warrant that are consistent with pattern impressions at the crime scene. Another factor that what? Corroborates Darius Robinson. And there's more. I told you they did a search warrant at the defendant's room at the Bloom's residence. And you're going to hear, as I said before, that Darius Robinson will tell you the defendant was staying with the Blooms. Well, you're going to hear from the Blooms. They're also going to say that he stayed there. Corroboration. They did a search warrant and they found some items in the defendant's room. And you know what they found? Property stolen from the Simpson residence. Like a watch, like a coin, some paperwork, jewelry boxes in the defendant's room at the Bloom residence. You don't have to take Darius's word for that. Guess whose fingerprints are on some of this? An exact, perfect match. The defendant's. Proof of recently stolen property. And remember, he's out of town over that weekend. And this property is in the defendant's room. I didn't tell you this before. The search warrant was executed early on the 22nd. He was still in custody. So he was arrested by around noon on the 21st. Early hours of the 22nd is when the search warrant was done. And that's when this property was found. The defendant's prints on items stolen from the Simpsons. Now, the murder weapon in this case was never recovered. You heard the defendants themselves were out trying to find it on the Monday after the homicide. It was never recovered. Even though it was never recovered, we're going to prove to you that the defendant was in possession of that firearm. About 3 weeks before the Simpson homicide, there was a burglary in the Highlands area at a place where Larry Tyndall lived. It was his home. During that burglary, that Darius Robinson is going to tell you he did with the defendant, a gun bag or a range bag, tan in color, was taken from the Tyndall's residence. This bag had a couple of items in it. One of the items was a pair of blue ear muffs to protect the ears while, practice shooting. There was .22 caliber ammunition in that bag. And guess what else was in the bag? A small caliber, actually .22 caliber white handle revolver. And there were also blanks in this bag because Mr. Tyndall would use blanks to help train a hunting dog. So all in this one bag, you had these various items. Do you know where this bag was found? When they did the search warrant of the defendant's room, they found this tan range bag. And they found blue earbuds. And they found Mr. Tyndall's possessions. However, the white-handled revolver was not in that bag. Again, evidence that corroborates what Darius Robinson is telling you, because he said he did this burglary with the defendant. Now, you might recall that I told you before that the defendant texted Darius Robinson at the time they were apprehended and said, don't say we were dropped off. Say we were dropped off, meaning put distance between them and the motorcycle. Well, they did find a motorcycle key on the defendant. And guess what that motorcycle key opened? It opened the glove box or the storage compartment underneath the seat of the motorcycle that both defendants were on. And this is a motorcycle that the defendant, during his interview, admitted was his. He used it. He had the key. Inside of that glove compartment was a box of .22 caliber ammunition. Now, there's a lot of .22 caliber ammunition in the world. But Mr. Tyndall's going to tell you that that looks exactly like the box he had in his gun bag with the .22 caliber revolver. As I said, there's more than that box of ammunition in the world. But when they opened up the box, what did they find? They found some live .22 caliber rounds, and guess what else they found? Blanks. Blanks. Just as Larry Tyndall had kept in that range bag with the .22 caliber. So there's blanks and live .22 rounds in the defendant's glove box, just as Larry Tyndall has described, all together in this tan bag found in the defendant's dresser. Well, why is this important? Well, you remember when I said they took the bullets from Brian Simpson's body and sent them to the crime lab? Well, they were examined by Mark Chapman, an expert in firearms. He carefully examined the bullets that came from Mr. Simpson's body. And guess what else he did? He took one of the .22 caliber bullets that were found right underneath the defendant in his motorcycle, and he took it apart. He completely took the bullet apart and minutely examined the bullet. And then, after he did that, he compared the bullet from the defendant's motorcycle, the one in the defendant's possession, stolen from the Tyndall residence, and he compared it to the two bullets from Brian Simpson's body. And guess what he found? He found that all of these bullets were copper washed. They were all the same size. They were the same shape. They were the same weight. They all had 3 rings around them, all consistent with each other. The bullet in the motorcycle to the bullets in Brian Simpson's body. And there's more. Each bullet at the base had a dimple that you're going to hear from Mr. Chapman is kind of not common. All 3 of them had the same dimple at the base. The 2 bullets from Brian Simpson's body and the bullet from the defendant's motorcycle. Now, during the course of jury selection, you heard that the defendant is presumed innocent. He's cloaked and a presumption of innocence. The Constitution, the flag, is putting him in that cloak. Just as Brian Simpson was cloaked in the flag as he tried to defend his home. And you're going to see in this trial, bit by bit, step by step, exhibit by exhibit, and witness by witness, the cloak of innocence is going to be ripped off the defendant to expose him as the murderer he is of Brian Simpson. At the end of this case, you will see the defendant is guilty, as he's been indicted, for first-degree murder and armed burglary. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Dunn.